The gunman pistol-whipped a 71-year-old Korean War veteran so hard his dentures flew across the waiting room floor. Harold Jensen's blood splattered the white linoleum. Before his body even hit the ground, a second gunman fired into a 23-year-old soldier's shoulder and watched him spin and collapse screaming. 4 armed men stood inside a VA hospital emergency room. The metal detector was broken. Security was gone. 30 hostages, no police, no SWAT, no way out. And every single Marine in that room, combat veterans from 3 different wars, was completely helpless, except one person, the rookie nurse they'd been mocking for 12 weeks. The one nobody knew was a Navy SEAL. If this story moves you, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and follow Kira's journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The gunshot punched through the ceiling tiles and dropped a shower of white dust onto the emergency room floor. 30 people froze. The fluorescent lights kept humming. Somewhere behind the nurse's station, a heart monitor beeped 3 times and went silent. And Kira Ellison, 3 months into her first civilian nursing job, still fumbling with the electronic charting system, still apologizing every time she bumped into a gurney, dropped behind the counter and felt something cold shift in her left scrub pocket. A challenge coin. Jason's challenge coin. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the rookie nurse that Liberty Veterans Medical Center had been laughing about for 12 weeks disappeared. What replaced her was something no one in that building was ready for. But we need to go back, 9 days back, because what happened in that emergency room didn't start with a gunshot. It started with a cup of coffee and a crossword puzzle, and a woman who was trying so hard to be invisible that she almost succeeded. Kira Ellison stood in the 3rd floor break room of Liberty Veterans Medical Center at 6 in the morning, holding a thermos of strong black coffee, the good stuff she brewed at home, not the watery poison from the hospital machine. Through the window, she could see the gray hulls of Navy destroyers docked at Naval Station Norfolk. She watched them every morning. She never told anyone why those ships made her chest ache. "You're in my spot." Kira turned. A heavy-set nurse with a clipboard and a lanyard thick with credentials stood in the doorway. Denise Hartwell, senior ER nurse, union representative. 30 years of seniority and a way of looking at new staff that made them feel like they'd committed a federal crime by existing. "I'm sorry," Kira said. "I didn't know there were assigned spots." "There aren't, but that's where I stand. And I've been standing there since before you graduated high school." Kira picked up her thermos and moved. "Sorry. You say that a lot." "I know. Sorry." Denise watched her go with the expression of a woman cataloging evidence for a case she hadn't filed yet. Kira felt it on her back like a laser sight. She kept walking. Down in the ER, the morning shift was already grinding. Liberty Veterans Medical Center served 11,000 veterans across southeastern Virginia, and it did so with roughly half the staff it needed, equipment that belonged in a museum, and a budget that had been gutted so thoroughly that the nurses had started a secret collection jar to buy their own supplies. Kira logged into her station. The electronic charting system loaded slowly, the way it always did, and she stared at the screen and tried to remember which drop-down menu led to the medication reconciliation page. 3 months in, and the software still defeated her on a daily basis. "You're in the wrong tab." She looked up. A young tech named Marcus, 24, ex-Navy corpsman, was leaning over her shoulder. He pointed at the screen. "Reconciliation is under the patient summary, not the orders page. Everybody makes that mistake." "Thank you. I'm sorry, I should know this by now." "Stop apologizing. It's a garbage system. Half the doctors can't figure it out either." He paused, looked at her. "You doing okay? You look tired." "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours straight in 3 years, but that wasn't something you told a coworker at 6:15 in the morning. Marcus nodded the way people nod when they know you're lying but don't want to push it, and he moved on. At 7:30, the morning staff meeting began. 15 nurses packed into a conference room that smelled like stale donuts. Denise ran the meeting. She always ran the meeting. Supply requests, Denise said, flipping a page. We're still waiting on the level 1 infuser replacement parts and the updated crash cart medications. Moving on. Actually, the word was so quiet that 3 people had to turn around to see who'd spoken. Kira was standing in the back, her hands clasped in front of her, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to ask about the supplies shortages in the ER. We've been low on basic trauma supplies for 6 weeks. We ran out of chest seals last Thursday. The room went still, not because the question was wrong, because Kira had asked it. The new girl, the one who apologized for breathing. Denise's pen stopped moving. She looked at Kira the way a cat looks at a mouse that just walked onto the kitchen counter and sat down. We've filed the requisitions through proper channels. These things take time. 6 weeks is a long time to be short on chest seals in a trauma-capable ER. Are you questioning the supply chain process, Miss Ellison? I'm not questioning the process. I'm saying the process isn't working. We had 2 gunshot wounds last week, and I had to improvise occlusive dressings with plastic wrap and medical tape. Denise's eyebrows rose. You improvised medical equipment without authorization? That's a compliance issue. The patient was coding. I'll need to document this. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. The conversation was over. Kira sat down. Around her, every nurse in the room carefully avoided eye contact, the universal signal of people who agreed with her completely and would never say so out loud. After the meeting, Kira found herself climbing the stairwell to the 4th floor without planning to. Her feet carried her there the way they'd carried her into hard places before, moving before her brain could talk her out of it. Gerald Prescott's office door was open. The hospital board chairman was at his desk, laptop glowing, a window behind him framing a view that probably cost more in maintenance than Kira's annual salary. The walls were covered in photographs. Prescott shaking hands with senators, Prescott at ribbon cuttings, Prescott golfing with the governor. In every photo, he was smiling. In every photo, there was a veteran somewhere in the background, positioned like furniture. Mr. Prescott, I'm sorry to bother you. Come in, he waved without looking up. What can I do for you, sweetheart? Sweetheart. Kira's spine straightened half an inch before she caught herself. Sir, I'm a nurse in the ER. I've been trying to address critical supply shortages that are putting patients at risk. The supply issue, right? He leaned back, fingers laced over his stomach. Listen, what's your name again? Kira Ellison. Right. Listen, Kira, I understand the frustration, but we're in a budget transition. The board has approved a major capital project, the Prescott Veterans Wellness Center, and we need to prioritize spending during the construction phase. You're building a wellness center while the ER runs out of chest seals? His smile tightened. Just a fraction, just enough. Nurses don't understand budgets. That's not a criticism. It's just that your job is patient care. My job is the big picture. And the big picture sometimes requires hard choices. Sir, with respect, the ER security system hasn't been updated in years. The metal detector at the main entrance has been broken for over a month. It's on the schedule. It's been broken for a month. These things take time. The same words Denise had used. Exactly the same. Is there anything else? There was so much else. There was an entire building full of veterans sitting in hallways because there weren't enough beds. Nurses pulling double shifts because there wasn't enough staff. An emergency room running on duct tape and prayers while Gerald Prescott funneled millions into a construction project with his name on it. No, sir, thank you for your time. She was almost through the door when his voice caught her. Oh, and Kira, a word of advice. She stopped. Rookies are easy to replace. Keep your head down, do your job, and let the people who understand how this place works handle the rest. He smiled. The kind of smile a man wears when he knows exactly how much power he holds and wants you to feel the weight of it. Kira walked back to the ER with her fingernails cutting crescents into her palms. That afternoon, a written warning appeared in her inbox. Denise had filed it. Failure to follow medication documentation protocol. The incident she was citing had happened 2 weeks ago. A minor charting delay during a code blue. The kind of thing that happens to every nurse on every shift and is typically addressed with a verbal reminder over coffee. This wasn't a verbal reminder. This was a message. Kira stared at the warning. Then she stared at the ER. The broken equipment, the exhausted staff, the veterans sitting in plastic chairs waiting for a system that had already forgotten them. She thought about quitting. She was good at walking away. She'd walked away from 12 years, from a team, from a name that used to mean something in rooms most Americans didn't know existed. In her pocket, Jason's coin sat heavy and still. 9-letter word for stubborn. She turned. Gunnery Sergeant Dale Brixton was in the hallway, wheelchair blocking the entire frame. Crossword puzzle spread across his lap. A cold cup of coffee balanced on the armrest. He was 58 years old, built like a concrete barrier that time had slightly rounded at the edges. And he'd been recovering from lumbar fusion surgery for 2 weeks. In that time, he'd driven 3 nurses to request reassignment, insulted the hospital food with a creativity that bordered on poetry, and developed what could only be described as a professional interest in making Kira's life slightly less miserable. Obstinate, Kira said, doesn't fit. It's 9 letters, Obtinate. I know how to spell it. It doesn't fit the crosses. He squinted at her. You look like you just got back from a funeral. I'm fine. Sure you are. Come here and fix my IV before I bleed out in this hallway, and they blame you for that too. Against every instinct telling her to keep walking, Kira knelt beside his wheelchair and checked the IV line. It didn't need fixing. He knew that. She knew that. But her hands needed something to do. And Dale Brixton had spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, reading people's faces in combat zones, and he could tell when someone needed a task more than a conversation. She adjusted the drip. Her hands moved with a precision that made Dale's eyes narrow. She didn't fumble. She didn't hesitate. The IV line reconnected in 3 seconds, smooth and clean. The kind of technique you don't learn in a civilian nursing program. Where'd you train? He asked. Norfolk General, standard nursing program. Uh-huh. He watched her hands. You know, my wife was a nurse for 20 years. Good one, too. Real steady hands. But she wasn't that fast. Kira stood up. Your physical therapy is in 20 minutes, Gunnery Sergeant. You dodged the question. There wasn't a question. Sure there was. You just didn't hear it yet. He took a sip of his cold coffee, grimaced, and looked at her over the rim. You know what my drill instructor told me at Paris Island? Brixton, the Corps doesn't care if you're having a bad day. Neither does the enemy. So you can feel sorry for yourself, or you can square your shoulders and get back in the fight. But you can't do both. Kira said nothing. Sound advice. Terrible man. Got hit by a bus in Jacksonville in '94. He paused for effect. The bus was fine. Kira laughed. It escaped before she could stop it. A short, sharp sound, more surprise than humor. Dale grinned, the deep creased grin of a man who understood that laughter was a diagnostic tool, and he'd just gotten a result. There she is. I knew there was a person in there somewhere. She looked at him. This battered, impossible Marine in his wheelchair, with his crossword and his bad jokes, and his absolute refusal to let anyone near him stay miserable. And for 1 second, the words were right there, right on the edge. I was SEAL Team 6. My best friend died in my arms in Syria. I've been trying to be nobody for 3 years and it's not working. The moment passed. It always passed. Get back to your room, Gunnery Sergeant. I'm not carrying you if your back gives out in the hallway. Yes, ma'am. He saluted, casual, sloppy, the Marine version of a wink. Then he wheeled himself away, and Kira stood alone in the corridor, and pressed her thumb against the coin in her pocket until the edge of the trident bit into her skin. That night, alone in her apartment in Norfolk, she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and held Jason's coin and thought about the things she'd never told anyone in this city. She thought about Coronado, Class 287, the only woman in a pipeline designed to break people. And she'd made it through not because she was the strongest or the fastest, but because she simply would not stop. The instructors couldn't drown her in the surf. They couldn't freeze her in the bay. They couldn't make her ring the bell. One of them, a master chief with a face like a catcher's mitt, told her after Hell Week, "Ellison, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone take that much punishment and still be standing at the end of it." She thought about her first deployment, Afghanistan, the Hindu Kush. Nights so cold the air hurt your teeth. Days so hot the rocks burned through your boots. She was the combat medic, the one they called when the bullets stopped being theoretical and started being arterial. She'd held more dying men together with her hands than she could count, and she'd saved most of them, and the ones she couldn't save visited her in dreams that smelled like copper and sand. She thought about Jason Mercer, Jay, born in Annapolis, raised on Navy football and Old Bay seasoning and his mother's cornbread. The best operator she'd ever worked with and the closest thing she'd ever had to a brother in uniform. They'd survived 7 deployments together. They had the kind of trust that doesn't come from training or time, but from being in the absolute worst places on earth with another person and discovering that they will not leave you, not for anything. Syria, 2017, Al-Tanf. The ambush hit at 11:40 in the morning. Kira closed her eyes and let the memory play the way it always played, the way a film projector runs when you can't find the off switch. They were moving through a rocky wadi, loose formation, standard patrol. Jason was 10 feet to her left, making a joke about the chow at Al Udeid, something about the powdered eggs tasting like drywall, and she was laughing, and then the world split open. The sound came first, always the sound first, the cracking of 7. 62 rounds passing so close you feel the heat on your neck. Then the dust, then the screaming, then the training, kicking in like an engine that runs whether you want it to or not. 4 operators and 1 combat medic pinned in a dry riverbed. 50-plus fighters sweeping the ridge above them. No air support for 40 minutes. No extraction for 11 hours. Senior Chief Petty Officer Kira Ellison, call sign Viper, performed a needle decompression on a collapsed lung while bullets kicked dirt 6 feet from her head. She packed a femoral wound with hemostatic gauze and held pressure for 90 minutes while talking calmly, steadily, about nothing. About the Orioles' pitching rotation. About the poker game Jason owed her $40 from. Jason was behind a rock outcrop, returning fire, laughing between bursts. "You'll get your money when we get out of this, Viper." Both wounded operators survived. They were extracted at 22:47. Jason was not extracted. Jason was carried. He took a round through the neck during the final push to the extraction point. Through and through, carotid artery. Kira held him in the back of the Blackhawk with both hands pressed to his throat, and she talked to him the way she'd talked to every wounded man she'd ever treated. Calm, steady, refusing to let the universe hear fear in her voice. "Stay with me, Jay. Stay with me. We're almost there. You owe me $40, you hear me? You owe me $40 and I intend to collect." The light left his eyes somewhere over the Syrian desert. She felt the exact moment. The pulse under her fingers going from something to nothing. The warmth leaving his skin degree by degree until her hands were holding a man who wasn't a man anymore, but a memory shaped like one. Petty Officer First Class Jason Mercer, 28 years old, born in Annapolis, Maryland, the man who gave her his challenge coin that morning and said, "Let's roll." Kira opened her eyes. Her apartment was dark. The coin was warm in her palm. She realized she'd been holding it so tightly that the trident had left a mark in her skin. She'd left the Navy 14 months after Jason died. They offered her the instructor billet at Little Creek. Teach the next generation. Pass on everything she knew. She lasted 2 days. Every student had Jason's face. Every training scenario was the riverbed. So she ran. Guatemala first. A rural clinic outside Antigua. She delivered babies and treated dengue fever and remembered what medicine felt like when it wasn't measured in blood loss per minute. Then back to the States, nursing school, a new badge, a new city, a new version of herself that didn't carry weapons or clear rooms or know how to keep a man alive with nothing but her hands and her voice and the sheer, stubborn refusal to let death win. Except you can't unlearn what your body knows. You can't stop scanning exits. You can't stop mapping a room for threats the moment you walk in. You can't unhear the difference between a car backfiring and a 9mm round, or unfeel the weight of a sidearm you haven't carried in 3 years, but could still field strip, blindfolded. The next morning, Kira walked into Liberty Veterans Medical Center and did what she always did. She smiled. She apologized. She charted slowly and carefully and asked questions she already knew the answers to. She let Denise Hartwell move her off the trauma bay rotation again. She let the techs talk about her in the break room. She let them believe she was exactly what she appeared to be, a nervous, uncertain rookie who didn't belong. It was the safest lie she'd ever told, and the loneliest. But someone wasn't buying it. Ruth Calloway had been the volunteer front desk coordinator at Liberty Veterans Medical Center for 4 years, ever since her retirement from the Navy. 67 years old, silver-haired, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the kind of woman who looked like she should be organizing a church bake sale. She wasn't. Master Chief Ruth Calloway had spent 30 years aboard Navy vessels, 8 deployments, and had been one of the first women to serve in a combat support role during Operation Desert Storm. She knew what combat training looked like because it lived in her bones, and she'd been watching Kira since day one. It was the exits. Every time Kira entered a room, her eyes swept left to right, up, then back to center. She mapped windows, doors, choke points. She did it in under 3 seconds, and she did it so naturally that you'd miss it entirely if you weren't looking. Ruth was looking, because Ruth had done the same thing every day for 30 years. On Thursday afternoon, Ruth was shelving pamphlets at the front desk when Kira walked through the lobby on her way to the cafeteria. Ruth watched her pause at the intersection of 2 hallways, just for half a second, just long enough for her eyes to do the sweep. Kira stopped, turned. Yes, ma'am? Ruth looked at her over her reading glasses. How are you settling in? Fine, thank you. That's good. It's a tough place to be new. People here have been through a lot. They build walls. I've noticed. Ruth held her gaze a beat longer than normal. Some walls are for protection. Some are for hiding. Trick is knowing which kind you're looking at. Kira didn't respond. Her face was perfectly still. Too still, Ruth thought. The kind of still that takes practice. Have a good lunch, sweetheart, Ruth said, and went back to her pamphlets. But she didn't stop watching. Friday afternoon, Denise posted the next week's schedule. Kira was on triage desk again. She stood in front of the schedule board and stared at it long enough for the charge nurse on duty to notice. You okay, Ellison? Fine. She walked to the supply closet, closed the door, leaned her back against it. In the dark, surrounded by gauze and saline and the chemical smell of disinfectant, she pressed her palms flat against the wall and breathed. In through the nose, 4 counts. Out through the mouth, 6 counts. The same breathing pattern she'd used in the riverbed. The same pattern she'd taught to wounded operators who were bleeding out and panicking and needed something, anything, to hold on to. She was not in a riverbed. She was in a supply closet in Norfolk, Virginia, and nobody was shooting at her, and the only thing bleeding was her pride. But the body doesn't know the difference. The body keeps score. And Kira Ellison's body had 12 years of scores it hadn't finished settling. She stayed in the closet for 4 minutes. When she came out, her face was composed. Her hands were steady, and she went back to the triage desk and logged into the charting system and pretended to be someone she wasn't for the 900th consecutive day. In the lobby, Ruth Calloway looked up from her desk and watched Kira walk past. The old Master Chief's fingers touched the anchor pin hidden under her volunteer badge. "I see you, girl," Ruth whispered to no one. "I don't know what you're carrying, but I see it." That night, the nightmare came again. The wadi, the gunfire, Jason's blood on her hands, warm and then not warm, his voice getting quieter. "You'll get your money, Viper." She woke at 3 in the morning, gasping, hands cupped in the wrong position. She sat on the edge of her bed and held the coin and thought about calling someone. Her father, her old commanding officer, the VA crisis line that she'd saved in her phone and never once dialed because she was Senior Chief Petty Officer Kira Ellison, call sign Viper. And Vipers don't call crisis lines. Vipers handle it. She was handling it. She was handling it the way she handled everything, alone, in the dark, with white knuckles and a dead man's coin, and the absolute conviction that if she just kept moving, kept working, kept being nobody, the weight of who she used to be would eventually stop crushing her. It wasn't working. She knew it wasn't working. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in the part that was still an operator, still assessing threats, still running scenarios, she knew that something was going to break. Either the disguise or the person underneath it. She just didn't know which one would go first. She set the coin on her nightstand. The trident caught the streetlight coming through her window. 9 days from now, 4 men with guns would answer that question for her. Monday morning, 6 days before the attack, Kira made the decision that changed everything. She walked into the ER at 5:45, 15 minutes before her shift, and found Denise Hartwell already at the nurse's station, typing with the focused aggression of someone composing a document meant to hurt. Kira didn't stop. She didn't apologize. She walked straight past Denise, clocked in, and pulled up the supply inventory on her terminal. The numbers confirmed what she already knew. Chest seals, 0. Hemostatic gauze, 4 packets, enough for 1 serious trauma. Tourniquets, 2. In a hospital that served 11,000 veterans. Ellison, Kira didn't turn around. "Yes, you're on triage desk today. I saw the schedule." "Good, then you know where to go." Denise paused. "And Ellison? I submitted a performance review recommendation to HR this morning. Probationary nurses who can't adapt to departmental standards don't usually make it past 6 months." Kira's fingers stopped on the keyboard. She felt the heat climb up the back of her neck. She'd had men fire rockets at her from 300 meters, and her hands hadn't shaken. But something about Denise Hartwell's voice, that polished administrative cruelty, the weaponized paperwork, the slow suffocation of someone's career through policy and procedure, it reached a place that combat never touched. She turned around. "Are you threatening to fire me?" Denise's expression didn't change. "I'm informing you of the process. There's a difference." "No, there isn't." For 2 full seconds, they looked at each other. Denise blinked first. Not much, just enough for Kira to see it. "Triage desk, Ellison, now." Kira went, but she didn't go quietly. Not inside. Inside, something was shifting. Something she'd kept locked down for 3 years was pressing against the walls, and the walls were getting thinner. At 8:15, a commotion broke out in the waiting room. PFC, Tyler Dawson, 23, Army Infantry, back from Afghanistan 8 months and falling apart 1 panic attack at a time, was on his feet, fists clenched, chest heaving, eyes locked on something that wasn't in the room. "I need everyone to step back," Kira said from the triage desk. Nobody stepped back. A security guard, the only one on duty because Prescott had cut the security budget to fund his wellness center, moved toward Tyler with his hands up. "Sir, I need you to calm down." "Don't touch me. Tyler's voice cracked. "Don't touch me! Don't touch me!" The guard reached for his arm. Tyler swung. The punch missed by a foot, but the guard stumbled backward into a row of plastic chairs that clattered across the floor like gunfire. And Tyler's whole body jerked at the sound, and he dropped to his knees and covered his head with both hands and started screaming. Kira was around the triage desk and beside him in 4 seconds. She didn't run. She moved fast and low and deliberate, the way you approach a wounded animal, the way you approach a man who's back in a war zone and doesn't know it. Tyler, her voice changed. Nobody in the ER had heard this voice before. It was calm and level and carried a frequency that cut through panic like a blade through paper. "Tyler, look at me. You're in Norfolk. You're in the VA hospital. You're safe. Breathe with me. In through your nose. Hold it. Now out." His eyes found hers, wild, wet, terrified. But they found hers, and they held. "In through your nose. Good. Hold it. Now out. Good. Again." 30 seconds. That's all it took. 30 seconds and Tyler Dawson went from full-blown dissociative flashback to sitting on the floor of a VA hospital, shaking but breathing, tears running down his face, looking at a rookie nurse like she just pulled him out of a burning building. "How did you do that?" he whispered. "Do what?" "Your voice. You sounded like my team leader." Kira's expression didn't change. "I get that a lot. Come on, let's get you checked in." She helped him up. She walked him to a chair. She brought him water and sat with him until his hands stopped shaking. And she never once broke eye contact because she knew in her bones that the worst thing you can do to a man in crisis is look away. Across the waiting room, Dale Brixton watched from his wheelchair. He'd seen the whole thing. The way she moved, the way her voice shifted, the way she positioned herself between Tyler and the rest of the room without anyone noticing. He'd seen that before. In Helmand Province. In rooms where people who moved like that wore body armor and carried rifles and had call signs instead of names. Dale wheeled himself to the break room. He sat there for a long time, staring at his crossword puzzle without seeing it. Then he picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't dialed in 4 years. "Briggs? It's Dale Brixton." "Yeah, I know. Listen, I need you to do something for me. I need you to check a name." On the other end, retired Master Sergeant Tom Briggs, who now worked as a civilian contractor at JSOC headquarters in Fort Liberty, said, "Whose name?" "A nurse, Kira Ellison. She works at the VA hospital in Norfolk." "Something about her doesn't add up." "What do you mean, doesn't add up?" "I mean she starts IVs faster than any corpsman I ever served with. She talks down a panicking combat vet like she's done it 1,000 times under fire. And she checks exits every time she walks into a room. I need to know who she is." Briggs was quiet for a moment. "That could be a lot of things, Dale." "It could, but it isn't. I know what I'm looking at. I just can't prove it yet." "Give me 24 hours. Dale hung up. He stared at his phone. He thought about Helmand in 2012. Pinned down for 16 hours, 3 of his Marines bleeding out, no air support, and then out of the darkness, 4 operators and a medic who kept his boys alive for 3 hours under fire while the shooters held the line. SEAL Team 6. He never got the medic's name, never got any of their names. That's how it worked with those teams. Ghosts who saved your life and disappeared before you could thank them. He looked down the hallway toward the triage desk where Kira Ellison was logging Tyler Dawson's vitals with steady hands and a face that showed nothing. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered. Tuesday morning, Gerald Prescott held a board meeting in the 4th floor conference room. The PowerPoint was polished. The projector hummed. 12 board members sat around a mahogany table that had been purchased with funds originally allocated for ER ventilation repairs. The Prescott Veterans Wellness Center will be the premier veteran care facility on the East Coast, Prescott said, advancing to a slide showing an architect's rendering of a gleaming building that looked nothing like the crumbling hospital it was supposed to complement. "We've secured the construction contract through Allied Veterans Development, and we're on track for groundbreaking in March. Allied Veterans Development, a company that shared an office address with Prescott's personal real estate firm, a company whose board of directors included Prescott's brother-in-law and his college roommate, a company that had received $4.3 million in redirected VA hospital funds through a chain of shell LLCs so clumsily constructed that they would later be described by a federal investigator as the least sophisticated fraud I've seen in 20 years. But nobody in that conference room was looking at the fine print. They were looking at the renderings and the projected revenue and the smiling face of a man who had turned a public hospital into his personal ATM. "What about the security upgrades?" one board member asked. A retired colonel named Patricia Webb, who still read every line item in every budget report. "On the schedule," Prescott said. "The metal detector has been down for over a month, Gerald." "Patricia, I appreciate your diligence, but we can't let one piece of equipment derail a $50 million capital project. The replacement parts are on order." They weren't on order. The purchase order had been drafted, submitted to Prescott's office for approval, and filed in a drawer that Prescott opened approximately never. Patricia Webb made a note in her binder. She underlined it twice. It wouldn't matter for another 5 days. Wednesday afternoon, Kira was restocking the supply closet when Marcus, the young tech, knocked on the open door. "Hey, Ellison, got a minute?" "Sure." He stepped inside and lowered his voice. "Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Denise is building a case against you. I overheard her on the phone with HR this morning. She's documenting everything. Every late chart, every time you ask a question. She even wrote up the thing with Tyler Dawson." "She wrote me up for helping a patient?" "She wrote you up for leaving the triage desk without authorization during a security incident. That's how she phrased it." Kira leaned against the shelf. The gauze packets behind her shifted. 4 left, enough for one bad day. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus hesitated. "Because I was a corpsman. 4 years, Fleet Marine Force. I know what good medical instincts look like, and yours are scary good. And I know what a hostile work environment looks like because the Navy invented it." He paused. "Also because what you did for Dawson was the best crisis intervention I've ever seen. And if Denise gets you fired for it, this place loses the only person who's actually trying to fix things." "Thank you, Marcus." "Don't thank me. Watch your back." He left. Kira stood in the supply closet, surrounded by shelves that should have been full and weren't, in a hospital that should have been safe and wasn't, working for people who should have cared and didn't. She pressed her thumb against Jason's coin through the fabric of her scrub pocket. "What would you do, Jay?" She knew what he'd say. He'd say the same thing he always said before every mission, every op, every impossible situation they'd walked into together for 7 years. "Viper, we don't quit. We adapt. We overcome. And we make them regret ever thinking we were the easy option." Thursday morning, Dale Brixton got his answer. His phone buzzed at 0600. He was already awake, sitting in his hospital bed, crossword untouched, coffee getting cold. He answered on the first ring. "Dale, it's Briggs. What did you find?" A long pause. The kind of pause that told Dale everything before a single word was spoken. "I can't tell you what I found." Dale's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean you can't tell me?" "I mean the file is classified. I mean I made one inquiry and got a call from someone at Warcom within an hour telling me to stop asking questions. I mean whatever Kira Ellison was before she was a nurse, it's above my clearance and it's above yours. And there are people in Virginia Beach who want very much for nobody to be having this conversation." Dale's heart was hammering. "Briggs, give me something. I can't give you details. I can give you a reaction. When I ran her name, the person I talked to at Naval Special Warfare Command didn't say, 'Who's that?' He said, and I'm quoting, 'Why is someone asking about her?' That's not a response you get for a regular sailor, Dale. That's a response you get for an operator." Dale closed his eyes. "SEAL?" I can't confirm that. You just did. Silence on the line. Dale, whatever she's doing at that hospital, leave it alone. She's there for a reason. People like her always are. She's there because she's broken, Briggs. I can see it. Then maybe what she needs is someone who sees it and doesn't blow her cover. Did you think about that? Dale hadn't thought about that. He thought about it now. He thought about Helmand, about lying in the dirt with 3 wounded Marines, while a medic he never saw clearly kept them alive through the longest night of his life. About the voice in the darkness, calm and steady, talking about nothing while hands that never trembled did impossible things. He thought about Kira Ellison in the break room, staring at the harbor with a thermos of black coffee and eyes that looked exactly like his own in the first year after he came home. All right, he said, I'll leave it alone. He hung up. He looked at his crossword, 9-letter word for stubborn. The clue had been mocking him for a week. He wrote nothing. He just sat there and thought about a woman named Kira Ellison who carried something heavy in her left pocket and hummed to him in the dark when she thought no one could hear. That same Thursday, Ruth Calloway made her move. Not a big move, a quiet one. The kind of move a 30-year Navy Master Chief makes when she wants someone to know they've been seen without making them feel exposed. Kira was passing through the lobby at shift change when Ruth called out to her. Kira, come here a second. Kira stopped. Yes, ma'am? Ruth reached under the front desk and pulled out a thermos. My daughter sent me this coffee from a place in D.C. Too strong for me. You drink your coffee black and strong, right? Kira looked at the thermos. How did you know that? I pay attention. Ruth held it out. Take it. Consider it a welcome gift. 3 months late, but better than never. Kira took the thermos. Their fingers touched briefly. Ruth's hand was steady, warm. The hand of a woman who'd spent 3 decades in service and come out the other side with her spine intact. Ruth, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you stay here? After you retired, you could be anywhere. Why volunteer at a VA hospital? Ruth took off her reading glasses, cleaned them slowly on her blouse, put them back on. Because when I retired, I spent 6 months sitting in my living room, feeling like I'd lost my arms and legs. 30 years of purpose, gone overnight. My husband said I was like a shark that stopped swimming. I was dying and I didn't know why. She paused. This place gave me a reason to keep swimming. The veterans here, they need someone who sees them, not as patients, not as numbers, as people who gave something and got the short end back. She looked at Kira over those reading glasses. Sound familiar? Kira's jaw tightened, the micro-reaction she always buried. Ruth saw it this time. You don't have to tell me anything, Ruth said. I'm not asking. I'm just saying that whatever you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone. Not here. Kira's eyes were bright. She blinked twice, hard. Thank you for the coffee, Ruth. Any time, sailor. The word landed like a bullet. Kira's whole body went still. She looked at Ruth. Ruth looked back. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them looked away. Have a good evening, Kira. You too, Master Chief. It came out before she could stop it, the recognition slipping past every wall she'd built. Ruth's eyes widened, just a fraction, just for a second, and then softened into something warm and fierce and deeply, quietly proud. Neither of them said another word about it. Kira walked to the parking lot. Ruth watched her go. There you are, Ruth whispered. Took you long enough. Friday evening, 5 days before the attack. Kira sat in her apartment with her phone in her hand and her father's number on the screen. Robert Ellison, retired Army sergeant, truck driver out of Richmond. A man who'd served 20 years, raised a daughter alone after her mother died when Kira was 7, and never once asked her to be anything less than exactly who she was. She almost called. She held the phone for 11 minutes. She could see his face in her mind, the deep lines around his eyes, the gray stubble he never shaved on weekends, the way he always answered the phone with the same 2 words. Hey, kid. she couldn't call. Because calling meant talking. And talking meant explaining why she was working a job that was crushing her, in a hospital that was failing the people it was supposed to serve. Hiding who she was from everyone around her because the alternative was being who she used to be. And being who she used to be meant feeling everything she'd spent 3 years trying not to feel. She put the phone down. She picked up Jason's coin. She held it against her chest and closed her eyes and breathed. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold. Out through the mouth, 6 counts. The technique worked on panicking soldiers. It worked on bleeding operators in dry riverbeds. It did not work on a woman sitting alone in a dark apartment in Norfolk, Virginia, trying to outrun a ghost that lived in her pocket. Saturday, 4 days before the attack, Kira pulled a double shift because 2 nurses called in sick, and Denise couldn't find replacements. 16 hours on her feet. She treated a Vietnam veteran whose PTSD medication had been delayed for 3 weeks because the pharmacy was understaffed. She treated an Iraq veteran with a diabetic ulcer that had gone septic because he'd been waiting 4 months for a specialist appointment. She treated a 26-year-old Afghanistan veteran who came in for a routine blood draw and broke down crying in the phlebotomy chair because it was the anniversary of his best friend's death, and he had no one to talk to. Kira held his hand. She didn't say anything profound. She just held his hand and let him cry and stayed with him until his breathing steadied, the same way she'd stayed with every person she'd ever kept alive. Not with brilliance or heroism, but with presence. The simple, stubborn act of not leaving. At 2 in the morning, she found Dale Brixton awake in his room. He wasn't supposed to be there anymore. His discharge had been processed 3 days ago. He'd convinced his surgeon that he was experiencing intermittent numbness that required monitoring. He was lying. His surgeon knew he was lying. They both knew the other knew, and neither said a word about it. Can't sleep? Kira asked from the doorway. Haven't slept right since 2003. You? About the same. Come in, sit down. You look like you've been dragged behind a truck. She sat in the chair beside his bed. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hospital hummed around them. Monitors beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a vet coughed in his sleep. Kira, yeah, I know. 2 words. She felt them hit her chest like a round. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. I don't know what you mean. Yeah, you do. His voice was low, not accusing, not pushing, just the steady, careful voice of a man who understood that what he was about to say could shatter something fragile. I made a call. A friend at Fort Liberty ran your name, got shut down in an hour by someone at Warcom. Her hands gripped the armrests. I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm not going to ask you anything you don't want to answer. I just want you to know that I see you. Not the scrubs, not the badge, not the act. You. Kira stared at the floor. Her vision blurred. She blinked it clear. How long have you known? Since you fixed my IV in 12 seconds. No civilian nurse moves like that. Dale. Yeah? If you tell anyone, I disappear. I've done it before. I'll do it again. I'm not going to tell anyone. He reached for his coffee, took a sip, grimaced. But I am going to say one thing, and then I'll shut up about it forever. She waited. Whoever you lost over there, they wouldn't want you hiding in a supply closet, crying alone. They'd want you being who you are. All of it, not half. The silence that followed lasted 45 seconds. Kira counted every one of them. Then she stood up, walked to the door, and stopped with her hand on the frame. His name was Jason, she said without turning around. He was 28. I'm sorry. Me too. She walked out. Dale sat in the dark and listened to her footsteps recede down the hallway, steady and even and perfectly controlled. The footsteps of a woman who had just cracked open a door she'd kept sealed for 3 years and was terrified of what might come through it. 4 days. In 4 days, that door would blow off its hinges, and the person who walked through it would save every life in that building. Tuesday morning, 6:47 a.m. Kira clocked in and felt it immediately. The ER was wrong. Not in any way she could name, not in any way the other nurses noticed. But the part of her brain that had kept her alive in 6 countries across 12 years was firing a signal she hadn't felt since Syria. Something bad was coming. She couldn't explain it. She couldn't justify it. It was the same feeling she'd had 40 minutes before the ambush in Al-Tanf. A tightness in her stomach, a sharpening of the edges of everything, as if the world had shifted half a degree out of alignment and only she could see it. She shook it off. She'd been shaking off those feelings for 3 years. That was the deal. Leave the operator behind. Be a nurse. Be normal. Stop reading threat levels into every room and every face and every silence that lasted 2 seconds too long. 7:15 a.m. The ER was already overflowing. Flu season had hit Norfolk like a freight train. 3 ambulances were backed up at the bay doors. A burst pipe on the 2nd floor had maintenance scrambling and everyone else on edge. Denise Hartwell was running the floor with the focused intensity of a woman who believed that control was the same thing as competence. Ellison, triage desk, now. I'm already there, Denise. Then stop standing and start processing. We've got 14 walk-ins and 2 ambulance transfers, and I don't need you daydreaming. Kira sat down. She pulled up the intake screen. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. But under the desk, her left leg was bouncing, a habit she'd developed in the months after Syria, the body's way of burning off adrenaline that the mind refused to acknowledge. 8:30 a.m. The waiting room filled. Harold Jensen, 71, Korean War, was in his usual chair by the window, reading a folded newspaper with arthritic hands. He came every Tuesday for his blood pressure check. He'd been coming every Tuesday for 6 years. He always wore the same Korean War veteran's cap. He always brought the same newspaper. He always nodded at Kira when he came in, and she always nodded back. And neither of them said much because Harold Jensen belonged to a generation that believed politeness was measured in actions, not words. PFC Tyler Dawson was in the corner. 3rd panic attack visit this month. His knee was bouncing. His eyes were fixed on a spot on the wall that only he could see. Kira had been watching him since he walked in. She'd already decided that if he started to spiral, she'd get to him before anyone else could. 2 Vietnam vets, Frank Petrocelli and Bill Huang, were playing chess on a magnetic board they brought from home. They'd been playing chess in that waiting room every Tuesday for 4 years. Frank was winning. He was always winning. Bill didn't seem to mind. A young mother named Sandra Collins sat near the entrance with her 2-year-old son, Jaden, who had a fever of 102 and was crying the thin, exhausted cry of a child who'd been sick too long. And Dale Brixton was parked in his wheelchair near the intake window, crossword in his lap, coffee balanced on the armrest, pretending he had an appointment when everyone, including his surgeon, knew he didn't. Nocturnal bird of prey, Dale said loudly. 5 letters. Owlet, Kira said without looking up. They gave me an H in the 2nd position. What kind of owlet starts with an H? I don't know, Dale. I'm working. You're always working. That's your problem. 9:45 a.m. Kira processed 8 more patients. She was fast now, faster than she'd been 3 months ago, her fingers finding the right tabs and the right screens without hesitation. She'd adapted the way she adapted to everything, through repetition and discipline, and the stubborn refusal to let a computer system beat someone who'd mastered field surgery in a sandstorm. But the feeling wouldn't leave. That tightness, that edge. She looked at the main entrance. The metal detector sat there like a dead animal, unplugged, useless. It had been broken for 32 days. The single security guard on duty, a retired police officer named Gene Holloway, who was 63 and worked the job for the health insurance, was sitting at his post, scrolling through his phone. Kira stared at that broken metal detector and felt something cold move through her chest. You okay? Marcus said, passing behind her with a stack of lab orders. Fine. You keep staring at the front door. Just thinking. About what? She almost said it. She almost said, that metal detector has been broken for 32 days, and there's one unarmed guard between the parking lot and 30 vulnerable people. And if anyone wanted to walk in here with a weapon, there is nothing stopping them. Nothing. Not a single thing. Nothing, she said. Just tired. 10:15 a.m. Dr. Nathan Reeves arrived for his shift. 31 years old, Johns Hopkins residency, brilliant diagnostician, zero combat experience, zero crisis training. He walked in with a travel mug and a confident stride and greeted the nurses with the easy charm of a man who had never been in a room where that charm couldn't save him. Morning, Allison. How's the trenches? Full. That's what I like to hear. Keeps us employed. He winked and disappeared into the attending station. Kira watched him go. She thought about what would happen to Nathan Reeves if something went wrong. She thought about what would happen to all of them. She thought about the broken metal detector and the single unarmed guard and the 4 packets of hemostatic gauze in the supply closet. She pressed her thumb against Jason's coin through her scrub pocket. Stop it. You're a nurse. You're not on a mission. This is Norfolk, Virginia, not Al-Tanf. 10:32 a.m. A white van pulled into the hospital parking lot. Kira didn't see it. Nobody saw it. Gene Holloway was on his phone. The security camera covering the parking lot had been broken for 2 weeks. Another line item in Prescott's budget that had been filed in the drawer that never opened. 4 men got out. They were wearing gray work coveralls, the kind that maintenance workers wear, the kind that nobody looks at twice. 10:41 a.m. Kira's phone buzzed. A text from Dale. She looked down. 9-letter word for stubborn. Don't say obstinate. She typed back. I'm working. So am I. This crossword isn't going to solve itself. She almost smiled. Almost. 10:44 a.m. The 4 men approached the main entrance. The first man, Marcus Cole, 43, ex-Army medic, dishonorably discharged in 2019 for stealing controlled substances from a field hospital in Kabul, walked with the steady gait of someone who had done this before. Not this exactly, but close enough. He'd planned it for 3 months, studied the hospital's layout, learned the shift schedules, discovered the broken metal detector, counted the guards. 1, unarmed, 63 years old. Cole had recruited 3 men, Danny Pruitt, 29, the nervous one, armed with a Beretta M9 he'd bought at a gun show in Virginia Beach. Ray Womack, 36, ex-con, muscle, no military training, carrying a sawed-off shotgun under his coveralls. And Kevin Stills, 31, the driver, armed with a .38 revolver, tasked with securing the pharmacy corridor. They wanted opioids, fentanyl, OxyContin. The VA pharmacy at Liberty Veterans Medical Center held a supply worth approximately $200,000 on the street. Cole knew this because he'd worked in a VA pharmacy before his discharge. He knew the inventory system. He knew the security gaps. He knew that a VA hospital in Norfolk, Virginia, running on fumes and duct tape, was the softest target he'd ever find. 10:46 a.m. Cole flashed a maintenance badge at Gene Holloway. The badge was fake. Holloway glanced at it, nodded, and went back to his phone. 4 armed men walked through a broken metal detector into a room full of veterans. 10:47 a.m. They were 10 feet inside the ER when Cole pulled the Glock 19 from under his coveralls, aimed at the ceiling, and fired. The sound was a physical force. It slammed through the room and turned every head and stopped every heart. White dust rained from the ceiling tiles. Nobody moves. We're here for the pharmacy. Stay calm and nobody gets hurt. For 2 seconds, the room obeyed. Shock creates a window, a gap between what happened and what to do about it. 2 seconds of absolute compliance while 30 human brains tried to process the impossible. Harold Jensen stood up, 71 years old, Korean War, chosen reservoir, A man who'd watched Chinese soldiers pour over a frozen hill in 1950 while his friends died around him, and he kept firing because that's what you did. "Sit down, old man." Harold didn't sit down. Cole pistol whipped him. The Glock caught Harold above the right eye and opened a gash that sprayed blood across the linoleum. Harold went down hard. His newspaper scattered like dead leaves. His Korean War veteran's cap rolled under a chair. Sandra Collins screamed and pressed Jaden's face into her chest. The toddler wailed. Tyler Dawson, 23, Army, PTSD, 8 months home from Afghanistan, saw the blood and heard the gunshot, and his brain left Norfolk and went back to Kandahar. He lunged from his chair. Danny Pruitt, the nervous one, fired the Beretta. The round caught Tyler in the left shoulder. Through and through, he spun and hit the floor, and the sound he made was the sound of a man who'd heard that sound before in a different country and was suddenly back there. Kira dropped behind the nurse's station counter. Not dove, not fell, dropped, controlled, deliberate. The smooth, downward motion of a body that had been under fire before and understood that the first 3 seconds determine everything. Her back against the counter, her breathing even, her eyes open and tracking. In her left pocket, Jason's coin shifted against her thigh. For 3 seconds, she was the gap. The space between Kira Ellison, rookie nurse, and Senior Chief Petty Officer Ellison, call sign Viper, United States Navy. Then the coin settled, and something that had been sleeping for 3 years opened its eyes. She didn't become a different person. She became herself. Her eyes swept left. 4 hostiles, 2 in the ER, Cole by the door, Glock 19, 15-round magazine, 1 round fired, 14 remaining. Trigger discipline poor, but he was calm, trained, dangerous. Pruitt's center room, Beretta M9, hands shaking badly. He'd fired 1 round. He hadn't expected to fire at all. He was panicking. 2 more moving toward the pharmacy corridor. Womack and Stills. Out of sight, moving fast. Exits. Main entrance blocked by Cole. Back corridor 30 feet east. Door unlocked. Fire code violation. Leads to loading dock. Stairwell partially concealed by a supply cart. Pharmacy corridor held by hostiles 3 and 4. Civilians, 30 people. 1 actively bleeding from a gunshot wound. 1 bleeding from a head laceration. 1 toddler. 1 frozen doctor. Multiple veterans, several with mobility limitations. Dale Brixton in a wheelchair, 10 feet from her position, watching her with eyes that saw everything. She processed this in 5 seconds. Then she moved, low, fast, silent, across 6 feet of open floor to Tyler Dawson, who was on his back, left shoulder pumping blood, eyes wide and locked on a ceiling he couldn't see because he wasn't here anymore. He was in Kandahar. He was in Helmand. He was wherever the bullet had sent him. Soldier. Her whisper carried a frequency that Tyler's nervous system recognized before his conscious mind could process it. The calm, absolute command of someone who had talked dying men through worse. Look at me, in through the nose, out through the mouth. You're in Norfolk. You're safe. I've got you. His eyes found hers, locked on. His breathing stuttered, caught, then steadied. She examined the wound in 3 seconds. Through and through, lateral deltoid, no arterial involvement, no bone fragments. He'd live. She took a pen from her pocket, tore a strip from her own scrub top, and fashioned a pressure bandage with a technique that no nursing school in America teaches. Because it wasn't a nursing technique, it was a special operations combat medic technique designed for field application under direct fire. She performed it with the fluid, automatic precision of someone who'd done it 100 times in conditions that made this look like a picnic. Keep pressure here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Tyler nodded. His breathing was steady now. She'd given him a task. The panic had nowhere to go. She moved to Harold. The old man was on the floor, bleeding, conscious, eyes hard and clear. He grabbed her wrist with 70 years of stubbornness. "I'm okay. Help the others." She pressed gauze against his wound, guided his hand to hold it, and moved on. Cole and Pruitt hadn't noticed her. They were focused on the screaming, the chaos, the frozen doctor, the woman with the baby. Kira had moved through their blind spots with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd spent 12 years being where she wasn't supposed to be without being seen. She reached the back corridor door, unlocked, always unlocked. She opened it 6 inches and began evacuating patients, one by one, hand on a shoulder, whisper in an ear, 2 fingers pointed toward the corridor, then a flat palm. "Move that way, stay low." Standard tactical hand signals used across every branch of U.S. Special Operations. Dr. Reeves stared at her gestures with blank confusion. He didn't move. He didn't understand. He was still standing behind the nurse's station with his mouth open and nothing coming out. But the veterans understood. Frank Petrocelli looked at Bill Wong. They set down their chess pieces without a word. Frank moved first. Bill followed. 2 Vietnam veterans who hadn't taken orders in 50 years responded to those hand signals like they'd been waiting for them their entire lives. The younger vets moved next. An Iraq veteran on crutches, an Afghanistan veteran who'd been waiting for a prescription, a Gulf War veteran in a wheelchair who grabbed his own wheels and pushed himself down that corridor with a silence and discipline that would have made his drill sergeant weep. Sandra Collins, clutching Jaden, followed. Kira guided her with one hand on her back and positioned herself between the woman and the gunman. Always between, always in the line of fire, the way an operator shields a principal. Dale watched from his wheelchair. He saw her slice the pie at the corridor entrance, checking the angle 1 degree at a time. He saw her check her 6 every 4 seconds. He saw the way she moved, every step deliberate, every motion economical. A human weapon operating at full capacity for the first time in 3 years. He mouthed 3 words. What team? 11 people. Kira got 11 people out before Marcus Cole noticed. Cole was smart, trained. He turned from the pharmacy corridor and saw the back door closing and counted heads and realized the room was half empty. He moved fast, grabbed the nearest person, Denise Hartwell. She'd been crouching behind the triage desk, frozen solid. Her 30 years of seniority and her union credentials and her clipboard absolutely worthless against a man with a gun. Cole pressed the Glock against Denise's temple. His hand was steady. His eyes were not. Nobody else leaves. Bring them back. Now. The room froze. Pruitt swung the Beretta in a wide arc that covered half the room and endangered everyone. His finger was on the trigger now. Not the guard, the trigger. Kira stepped out from behind the supply cart. The air changed. There is a quality to the way a special operator occupies space, an economy of movement, a centered gravity, a stillness that isn't passive but loaded, like a spring at maximum compression. Kira had been hiding it for 3 months. She stopped hiding it. She stood in the center of the ER, 5'7", scrubs torn where she'd ripped fabric for Tyler's bandage. And she looked at Marcus Cole with eyes that had seen men like him in 6 countries across 2 continents. You're holding that weapon wrong. Her voice. Nobody in that hospital had heard this voice. It was flat and calm and carried the absolute authority of someone who does not make requests because she does not need to. Cole blinked. Get back. Your finger is on the trigger guard, not the trigger. That means you don't want to shoot her. She took 1 step forward. So let's talk. Get back or I'll... You'll what? You came for pills, not bodies. You're running a pharmacy job with a crew of 4. 2 are in the back right now wondering why it's taking so long. You picked this hospital because the security is garbage and the metal detector's broken. That tells me you're smart. Smart people don't kill hostages. It creates problems you can't solve. She was reading him, peeling him open with words and eye contact, in the kind of tactical psychology they teach at Coronado to people whose job is to walk into impossible situations and walk out alive. Cole's gun hand trembled. Half an inch, barely visible. Kira saw it. She moved. 8 seconds. That's how long it took. She closed the distance in 2 steps. Her left hand redirected the Glock, a hard strike to the inside of Cole's wrist that shattered his grip. She caught the weapon as it fell, dropped the magazine with her thumb, racked the slide to clear the chamber, and set the empty gun on the floor. Cole's back hit the linoleum before his brain registered what had happened. SEAL close quarters combat. Krav Maga Foundation adapted for special operations. Fast, brutal, efficient. Every Marine in that room recognized it. Pruitt raised the Beretta. His hands were shaking so badly the barrel traced circles in the air. Before Kira could turn, a 4-foot aluminum IV pole came spinning across the room like a javelin. It struck Pruitt's forearm with a crack that echoed through the ER. The Beretta clattered to the floor. Gunnery Sergeant Dale Brixton, wheelchair-bound, 2 weeks post-spinal surgery, in violation of every medical restriction his surgeon had given him. He'd thrown it from 10 feet away with the precision of a man who once placed third in the Marine Corps combat skills competition. His face was white. The throw had cost him something he'd be paying for weeks. He didn't care. Kira was on Pruitt in 2 seconds. He went down. She zip-tied both men's wrists with their own zip ties, taken from Cole's pocket during the disarm in the same fluid motion. Then she pulled the desk phone from behind the nurse's station. Her voice shifted again, this time to tactical brevity codes, descriptions, weapon types, positions of the 2 pharmacy gunmen. The 911 dispatcher on the other end, an ex-Marine named Torres, understood every word and related to Norfolk PD SWAT without asking her to repeat a single syllable. "Copy that," Torres said. "Ma'am, who am I talking to?" Kira paused. 1 second, 2. "Just a nurse," she said, and hung up. The SWAT team hit the pharmacy corridor 7 minutes later. Womack and Stills heard the boots and the commands and looked at each other and looked at the guns in their hands and set them on the floor and put their hands behind their heads. They surrendered without a shot. 10:58 a.m., 11 minutes. The whole thing lasted 11 minutes. The ER went silent. Not the good kind of silence, the kind that has weight, the kind that presses down on a room designed for noise and chaos, and the constant percussion of people being kept alive. 30 people stared at Kira Ellison. She was standing in the center of the room, scrubs torn, right forearm exposed, 3 parallel scars she'd always called a cooking accident visible under the fluorescent lights. They weren't from cooking. They were from a black-necked spitting cobra in a wadi in Syria. The 2 lines flanking the bite were from the field sutures she'd put in herself while her team held a perimeter around her. Around her neck, freed during the fight, Jason's challenge coin hung in the open air. The trident caught the light. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. She looked nothing like the woman who'd been apologizing her way through shifts for 3 months. Nobody spoke. The lights hummed. The clock ticked. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Dale Brixton gripped his wheels. His face was white. His back was screaming, but his eyes were locked on Kira with a clarity that cut through everything in the room. He wheeled himself forward. 3 feet from her, he stopped. "That wasn't nursing school," he said quietly. In a room of 30 silent people, his voice carried like a church bell. "That was SEAL CQC, close quarters combat. I trained with team guys. I deployed with team guys. I know exactly what I just saw." Kira didn't respond. She was looking at the coin in her hand. She closed her fist around it without realizing. "What team?" The question hung in the air. Every veteran in that room leaned in. Harold Jensen, blood drying on his forehead. Frank and Bill, chess game abandoned. Tyler Dawson, shoulder bandaged, sitting against the wall with wide eyes. Dr. Reeves, who'd been useless and knew it, The nurses, the techs, Denise Hartwell, whose mascara was running and whose hands hadn't stopped shaking since the gun left her temple. Kira opened her fist, looked at the coin, the trident on the front, JM on the back. 6, she said, almost to herself, almost to Jason. Dale closed his eyes, opened them. SEAL Team 6. He shook his head. The slow shake of a man watching a puzzle he'd been working on for weeks snapped together all at once. I was with 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines in Helmand, 2012. We were pinned for 16 hours, took casualties, no air support. His voice thickened. Team 6 pulled us out. 4 operators and a medic. That medic treated my guys under fire for 3 hours while your shooters held the line. He looked at her. That was your team. Kira said nothing, but her chin trembled once. A single, almost invisible movement, the kind of crack that appears in a dam just before it breaks. Dale straightened in his wheelchair. His back screamed at him. He didn't flinch. Then Gunnery Sergeant Dale Brixton, United States Marine Corps, retired, a man who had not saluted anyone since his discharge ceremony 6 years ago, raised his right hand to his forehead and held it there. Full, crisp, textbook, a Marine saluting a Navy SEAL. Semper Fi, Senior Chief. The words hit the room like a second gunshot, but this one didn't break anything. This one built. Harold Jensen moved first, 71 years old, blood still wet on his forehead. His Korean War veteran's cap was under a chair somewhere, and he didn't care. He pushed himself off the floor with hands that were arthritic and shaking and had held a rifle at Chosin Reservoir when the temperature was 30 below and the Chinese were coming over the hill, and every man around him was either dead or wishing he was. Harold Jensen braced himself against a plastic chair, got his feet under him, and raised his right hand to his forehead. His salute was imperfect. His arm trembled. His fingers weren't straight. It didn't matter. It was the salute of a man who had earned the right to render one in any condition he damn well pleased. And he held it like he intended to hold it until someone ordered him to stop. Tyler Dawson was next, still on the floor, left shoulder bandaged with a combat medic's field dressing, blood soaking through the fabric of a technique he now understood hadn't come from any civilian training. His good arm came up, his salute was sloppy, and his eyes were wet, and he didn't try to hide either one. Frank Petrocelli stood, 68 years old, Vietnam, 2 Purple Hearts. He knocked his chessboard off the armrest getting up, and the pieces scattered across the floor, and he didn't look down. His salute was crisp, military perfect, the muscle memory of 50 years snapping into place like a rifle bolt. Bill Huang stood beside him. Same war, same era, same understanding that what they were witnessing in this emergency room was something most people would never see and never understand. 2 Vietnam veterans, side by side, saluting a woman half their age who had just saved their lives with skills they recognized in their bones. Then the others, one by one. Every veteran in that room who could stand, stood. An Iraq veteran on crutches balanced on one leg and freed his right hand. A Gulf War veteran in a wheelchair raised his arm from the seated position. The way you salute when you can't stand. The way the regulations say is acceptable when physical limitation prevents the standard rendering. A room full of warriors from 5 decades and 3 wars. From Korea to Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan. Men who had been shot at, blown up, frozen, burned, broken, and rebuilt by a system that often forgot them the moment they took off the uniform. Men who had been sitting in plastic chairs in a VA hospital waiting room that smelled like floor wax and broken promises, waiting for a government that owed them everything to give them the bare minimum. They were all standing now, or as close to standing as their bodies allowed, and they were all saluting a woman they'd been calling the new girl for 12 weeks. Kira's vision blurred. She blinked, hard, twice. She was Senior Chief Petty Officer Kira Ellison, Call sign Viper, United States Navy. She had held a dying man's throat closed with her bare hands and hadn't cried. She had performed surgery on her own arm after a snakebite and hadn't cried. She had survived Hell Week and BUD/S and 12 years of operations in places where crying was a luxury that could get you killed. She cried. Not sobs, not a breakdown. 2 tears tracking down her cheeks in parallel lines. She wiped them with the back of her hand in a single sharp motion, the same way she'd always done, in every place where tears were something you acknowledged and dismissed in the same gesture. Then a hand settled on her shoulder from behind. She turned. Ruth Calloway stood there. The old Master Chief had removed her volunteer badge. Underneath it, pinned to her blouse, was a Navy anchor, the insignia of a Chief Petty Officer. Polished, golden, older than half the people in the room. "I knew," Ruth said quietly. "First day, the way you checked the exits." Kira stared at her. 3 months. 3 months of hiding, and Ruth had seen through it on day 1. Ruth extended her hand, not for a handshake, for a forearm clasp, the grip that operators use. Warrior to warrior, equal to equal. Master Chief Ruth Calloway, USS Baton, 1988 to 2018. 30 years, 8 deployments. She smiled, the kind of smile that carries 30 years of service and everything that comes with it. "Welcome home, sailor." Kira took her forearm, gripped it, held it, and for the first time in 3 years, the ground beneath her feet stopped moving. 11:14 a.m., the first wave hit. Boston PD, Norfolk SWAT, FBI cruisers and tactical vehicles flooding the parking lot. Officers in body armor pouring through the main entrance that 4 men had walked through unchallenged 40 minutes earlier. The ER became a different kind of chaos. Badges and jurisdictions and radios crackling and detectives with notebooks and paramedics rushing to Tyler Dawson and Harold Jensen, and the organized confusion of a system that arrives after the crisis is over and tries to make sense of what happened. A detective named Carla Vasquez, 15 years on the force, pulled Kira aside. "I need your statement, ma'am." Kira gave it, calmly, completely. Timeline, threat assessment, actions taken, weapons descriptions, suspect positions, evacuation route, disarmament sequence. She delivered it with the clinical precision of someone trained in after-action reports, because she had written hundreds of them, in rooms far more secure than this one, about operations far more classified than a pharmacy robbery in Norfolk, Virginia. Vasquez stopped writing mid-sentence. She looked up from her notebook. She looked at Kira the way you look at someone when the math suddenly doesn't add up. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. "I'm a nurse," Kira said. "Ma'am, I've been interviewing witnesses for 15 years. Witnesses don't give statements like after-action reports. They don't use words like threat assessment and disarmament sequence. And they definitely don't disarm men with guns using techniques I've only seen in special operations training videos." Kira said nothing. Vasquez studied her for a long moment. Then she closed her notebook. "Off the record, whatever you were before you were a nurse, thank you. You saved a lot of lives today." "I'm just a nurse." "Sure you are." 11:47 a.m., the second wave. Someone had been recording on their phone during the aftermath. Not the disarm itself, but the moment after. The salutes. The room full of veterans standing. Dale Brixton in his wheelchair with his hand at his forehead and tears on a face that hadn't cried since Helmand Province in 2012. The video hit Twitter at 11:52 a.m. By noon, it had 200,000 views. By 3 o'clock, 2 million. By 6 o'clock, it was on every cable news network in the country. By midnight, 14 million people had watched a room full of old warriors salute a woman in torn scrubs with a challenge coin around her neck. The comments section became a battlefield of its own. Veterans identifying themselves, sharing their own stories, tagging friends, tagging family, writing things they'd never written before to strangers on the internet, because something about that video, something about those salutes, cracked open a door they'd been keeping shut. I served 22 years and nobody ever saw me either, not until I was broken. That's my VA hospital. That's where I go. I was in that waiting room last Tuesday. She's not just a nurse, she's one of us. She was always one of us. 12:30 p.m. Gerald Prescott heard about the attack while finishing lunch at a restaurant in Virginia Beach. His phone rang 4 times before he answered. The hospital's chief of operations was on the line, speaking in the rapid, barely controlled voice of a man delivering catastrophic news. Gerald, there's been an armed incident at the hospital. 4 gunmen, they've been apprehended. Multiple injuries. FBI is on scene. Prescott's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Injuries? How bad? 1 gunshot wound, 1 head laceration. Both stable. Gerald, they walked right through the metal detector. The metal detector was being repaired. It wasn't being repaired, Gerald. It was broken. It's been broken for over a month. The purchase order for replacement parts has been sitting on your desk since January. Prescott set his fork down. Who's talking to the press? Nobody yet, but Gerald, someone recorded the whole thing. It's already online. What do you mean it's already online? I mean 14 million people have watched a video of armed men walking into our hospital through a broken metal detector. The FBI is requesting all maintenance records, security logs, and budget allocation documents going back 3 years. Prescott's face went white. Not the white of fear, the white of a man watching a very expensive house of cards begin to tremble in a wind he can't stop. Get me my lawyer, he said. Gerald, there's something else. What? The nurse who stopped the attack, the one in the video, she's a Navy SEAL. The line went quiet. Prescott sat in that restaurant with his expensive lunch in his expensive suit and his $4.3 million fraud, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years. The cold, creeping awareness that he was no longer the most powerful person in any room connected to his name. 1:15 p.m. The FBI arrived at Liberty Veterans Medical Center with federal auditors and a warrant for financial records. Special Agent David Chen, 20 years with the Bureau's Public Corruption Unit, walked into Prescott's 4th-floor office, looked at the photographs on the walls, the mahogany desk, the leather chair, and said to his partner, "This is going to be easy." It was easy. The shell companies were so transparent that Chen later told a reporter it was the least sophisticated fraud he'd seen in 2 decades. Allied Veterans Development, Prescott's construction company, had received $4.3 million in redirected VA hospital funds through 3 LLCs that shared the same mailing address as Prescott's personal real estate office. The contracts had been signed by Prescott's brother-in-law. The invoices had been approved by Prescott himself. The money that should have fixed the metal detector. The money that should have stocked the supply closet. The money that should have hired more nurses and more security guards and more of everything that a hospital full of veterans needed to function. Gerald Prescott had taken it all and used it to build a wellness center with his name on it. By 4 p.m., the Prescott Veterans Wellness Center was canceled. Every cent was ordered redirected to ER renovation, security infrastructure, and staff expansion. By 6 p.m., Prescott had been removed from the board of directors. By 9 p.m., he was arrested at his home in Virginia Beach. Federal fraud charges, wire fraud, embezzlement of government funds, conspiracy. The agents who arrested him said he opened the door in a bathrobe and slippers and said, "I want to speak to my attorney." His mugshot was taken at 10:14 p.m. He wasn't smiling. The same day, Marcus Cole and his 3 associates were processed at the Norfolk City Jail. Armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, federal charges related to targeting a VA facility. During processing, the booking officer mentioned to Cole that the nurse who disarmed him was a Navy SEAL. Cole sat very still for a long time. Then he said, "I want a lawyer." The booking officer, a former Marine corporal named Williams, looked at him and said, "Yeah, I bet you do." Wednesday morning, the day after the attack. Kira didn't sleep. She sat in her apartment all night with Jason's coin in her hand and the television on mute, watching footage of herself on every channel. They'd found her name. They'd found her service record, or at least the parts of it that weren't classified. They'd found her BUD/S class photo. They'd found a picture of her in desert camouflage from a deployment ceremony that someone had posted on Facebook 6 years ago. Former Navy SEAL combat medic single-handedly disarms gunman at VA hospital, the chyron read. She turned the television off. She held the coin against her chest. "Well, Jay," she said to the empty room, "so much for being invisible." Her phone had 47 missed calls. Reporters, news producers, a Pentagon press officer, 3 numbers she recognized from Naval Special Warfare Command in Virginia Beach, and 1 from her father. She called her father back. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, kid." "Hey, Dad. You okay?" "I'm okay. I saw the news." "Yeah." Robert Ellison was quiet for a moment. 20 years in the Army had taught him that silence was sometimes more useful than words. "You did good, Kira. I just did what I was trained to do." "I know. That's what I mean." Another pause. "Your mother would have been proud." Kira closed her eyes. Her mother, Catherine Ellison, had died of cancer when Kira was 7. She remembered her mother's hands. Warm, steady. The way she'd hold Kira's face and say, "You're going to be something, baby girl. I don't know what yet, but it's going to be something." "Thanks, Dad. You need anything? I can drive up. I can be there in 4 hours." "I'm okay, really." "You sure?" "I'm sure." She wasn't sure, but Robert Ellison knew his daughter, and he knew that pushing her was like pushing a wall. She'd open the door when she was ready. She always did. "I love you, kid." "Love you too, Dad." She hung up. She showered. She put on her scrubs. She drove to Liberty Veterans Medical Center and walked through the main entrance at 5:45 a.m. The same time she walked in every morning, past the metal detector that was already being replaced by a crew of workers who'd been there since midnight. The lobby was different. 2 armed security guards at the entrance, new cameras, a police officer stationed at the ER intake. Changes that should have happened months ago, that would have happened months ago if the money hadn't been sitting in Gerald Prescott's construction account. Ruth Calloway was at the front desk. She looked up when Kira walked in. Neither of them spoke. Ruth just nodded. Kira nodded back. It was enough. The ER was quiet. The morning shift hadn't fully started. Kira logged in at her station and pulled up her patient list and tried to remember what normal felt like. "Ellison." She turned. Denise Hartwell was standing behind her. No clipboard, no lanyard thick with credentials, no armor. Denise looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. Her hands, which Kira had never seen without a pen or a chart or some instrument of administrative control, were empty and visibly shaking. "Can we talk?" Kira looked at her. 24 hours ago, this woman had been building a case to have her fired. 24 hours ago, this woman had been crouching behind a desk with a gun to her head. "Break room," Kira said. They walked in silence. The break room was empty. Kira poured 2 cups of the terrible hospital coffee. She set one in front of Denise. They sat across from each other at the table where Kira had sat every morning for 3 months, drinking her good coffee and staring at the harbor, and trying to figure out how to be a person who didn't carry a weapon. Denise wrapped both hands around the cup. She didn't drink. She just held it. The way you hold something when you need your hands to stop shaking and you don't care what the something is. "My son is a Marine." The words came out stripped of everything. No professionalism, no authority, no walls. "Danny, he deployed to Fallujah in 2004. He was 19. Denise's voice cracked on the number. "He came back different. He doesn't talk about it. Doesn't talk about much, actually. He lives in a studio apartment in Richmond, and he works at a hardware store, and he calls me every Sunday, and we talk for 7 minutes, and neither of us says anything real. She pressed her hands harder against the cup. He was 19, Kira. He was 19 years old, and they sent him to Fallujah, and he came back, and he was gone. The boy I raised was gone, and there was this other person in his body who looks like Danny and sounds like Danny, but isn't Danny. Kira said nothing. She let the silence hold. I've spent 30 years in this hospital, Denise continued. 30 years watching nurses come and go. And I built walls. I built rules. I built systems. And I told myself it was about standards, about protecting this place, about making sure people earned their spot. She looked at Kira. Her eyes were red. But I think maybe I was just afraid of the new ones, the ones who might be better than me, the ones who reminded me that I'm getting old, and I still can't help my own son, and I don't know how to talk to people who've been where he's been. She swallowed hard. When that man put the gun to my head, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. 30 years of experience, and I was useless. And you, the woman I'd been trying to push out of this hospital for 3 months, you stepped in front of a loaded weapon for me. Her voice broke. I don't have an excuse for how I treated you. I have an apology, and I know the difference. The silence lasted 10 seconds. Kira counted them the way she counted everything, automatically, precisely, a habit she'd never break. Your son, Kira said. Danny, what's his full name? Daniel Robert Hartwell. Where in Fallujah? Denise blinked. I don't know. He won't tell me. Do you know his unit? 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. Kira nodded. She knew 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. She knew Fallujah in 2004. She knew what that city did to the men who fought in it. If Danny ever wants to talk to someone who gets it, I'm here. She paused. Not as a nurse, not as a SEAL, as someone who knows what it's like to come home and not be home. As someone who spent 3 years trying to outrun the same thing your son is trying to outrun. Denise's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. Hard. The nod of a woman holding herself together with the last thread of the last rope. Thank you, Denise whispered. One more thing. Denise looked up. Stop writing me up for doing my job. A sound escaped Denise that was half laugh, half sob. She covered her mouth with her hand and nodded again, faster this time, and Kira saw something she hadn't expected to see in Denise Hartwell's face. Relief. The relief of a woman who had been carrying a weight she didn't know how to put down and had just been given permission to set it on the floor. They sat in the break room for another 10 minutes. Neither of them said much. They drank bad coffee and watched the light change through the window and existed in the same space without pretending to be anything other than what they were. Two women who had been on opposite sides of a wall that neither of them had built and both of them had maintained. The wall was down now. What would grow in its place, neither of them knew yet, but the ground was clear. 8 a.m. Dale Brixton appeared in the break room doorway. He was supposed to have been discharged 4 days ago. His surgeon had threatened to physically remove him from the building. Dale had responded by filing a complaint about phantom numbness in his lower extremities that required, in his professional opinion as a retired Marine with no medical training, at least 2 more weeks of observation. His surgeon had stared at him for a long time and said, "Gunnery Sergeant, there is nothing wrong with your legs. With respect, doctor, you haven't lived in these legs for 58 years. I have, and they're numb." "They're not numb. They might be numb. You can't prove they're not." He was still there. "Viper," he said from the doorway. Kira looked up. It was the first time anyone in the hospital had called her by her call sign. The word landed differently than she expected. Not like an exposure, like a recognition. Dale. 9-letter word for stubborn. If you say obstinate, I'm going to wheel you into the parking lot myself. It's not obstinate. I told you it doesn't fit. He wheeled in, parked next to her. I heard the Navy called you. Word travels fast. This is a VA hospital. Word travels at the speed of light. What did they offer you? Instructor billet, Coronado, SEAL Combat Medic Training Pipeline, rank restoration, back pay. Dale whistled. That's a hell of an offer. It is. You going to take it? Kira looked at her coffee. She thought about Coronado, the ocean, the sand, the grinder where she'd done more push-ups than she could count, the classrooms where she could teach everything she knew to the next generation of operators who would go to the places she'd been and do the things she'd done, and some of them would come home, and some of them wouldn't, and she'd have to stand in front of them knowing that. She thought about Jason. She thought about the riverbed. She thought about every student having his face. No. Dale looked at her. No? No, I'm staying here. Here, this hospital, this ER, this place where Denise Hartwell has been trying to fire you for 3 months. Denise and I had a conversation this morning. Must have been one hell of a conversation. It was. Dale was quiet for a moment. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, grimaced the way he always grimaced because the coffee was terrible, and he kept drinking it anyway because Dale Brixton had been doing things the hard way for 58 years, and he wasn't about to start looking for shortcuts now. The new administrator offered you trauma team lead, he said. I heard that too. You hear everything. I'm an invalid in a wheelchair. Hearing things is all I've got. I turned that down too. Why? Kira set her cup down. She looked at Dale, this broken down, impossible Marine who had thrown an IV pole across a room while his spine was held together with titanium and surgical tape, who had called a classified military intelligence contact to find out who she was, who had kept her secret when keeping it was harder than telling it, who had saluted her in front of 30 people and cracked open something inside her that she'd been trying to keep sealed for 3 years. Because the veterans here don't need a team lead, she said. They need someone who understands what it's like to serve and then wake up one morning in a world that doesn't know what to do with you. They need someone who's been there, not an administrator, not a title, a person. Dale looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, slow, deep, the nod of a man who has heard the right answer and knows it in his gut. Okay then, he said. So what's the plan? Kira reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out Jason's challenge coin. She unclipped it from the chain she'd worn around her neck for 5 years and held it in her palm. The trident, the anchor, JM. Then she clipped it to her badge lanyard, in the open, visible, where anyone who looked could see it. I'm going to build something, she said. She called it the Bridge Program. The name came to her at 3 in the morning, 2 weeks after the attack, while she was sitting in her apartment holding Jason's coin and thinking about all the people she'd met in 3 months at Liberty Veterans Medical Center who were carrying the same weight she carried. Veterans who'd become nurses and techs and EMTs and paramedics. People who'd gone from saving lives under fire to saving lives under fluorescent lights and couldn't explain to anyone why the transition felt like drowning. The bridge. The space between who you were and who you're becoming. The part nobody talks about because nobody knows how. She pitched it to the new hospital administrator, Dr. Linda Okafor, a 54-year-old former Army colonel who'd been brought in to replace the interim leadership after Prescott's arrest. Okafor had spent 20 years running military hospitals. She'd seen what happened to veterans who fell through the cracks. She listened to Kira's pitch for 11 minutes, asked 3 questions, and said yes before Kira finished her second sentence. How soon can you start? I already started. I just need a room. You've got the 4th floor conference room, Prescott's old meeting space. Kira almost smiled. The one with the mahogany table? We're replacing the table. I don't want anything in this hospital with that man's taste on it. The first meeting was on a Thursday evening, 6 o'clock. Kira set up 12 chairs in a circle because circles don't have a head, and she didn't want anyone feeling like they were being briefed. She put a coffee maker in the corner, the good stuff she'd ordered online, not the hospital poison. She taped a single sheet of paper to the door. Bridge program, veterans in healthcare, all branches welcome, no rank required. 6 people came. Marcus was first. He walked in, looked at the chairs, looked at Kira, and sat down without saying a word. He didn't need an explanation. He'd been carrying the same disconnect since he left the Navy. The feeling of being trained for one world and living in another, and he'd been waiting for someone to name it. A respiratory therapist named Angela Torres came next. Ex-Army, 68 whiskey, 2 deployments to Iraq. She'd been working at Liberty Veterans for 4 years and had never told anyone she'd served because the one time she mentioned it during orientation, a senior nurse had said, "Oh, that's nice," and changed the subject. A paramedic named Deshaun Williams, ex-Marine, Fallujah. He drove an ambulance for Norfolk Fire and Rescue and picked up VA hospital transfers twice a week. And every time he walked through those doors, he felt his chest tighten. And he didn't know why, and he was tired of not knowing why. 2 ER techs who'd served in Afghanistan, and a pharmacy assistant named Grace Kim, former Navy corpsman, who sat in the back with her arms crossed and said nothing for the entire first meeting, and then came back the next week, and the week after that, and finally on the 4th week said, "I thought I was the only one who felt like this." Kira didn't lecture. She didn't present slides. She didn't hand out worksheets or pamphlets or any of the institutional machinery that veterans had learned to distrust. She sat in the circle and she talked. She told them about BUD/S. She told them about her first deployment. She told them about the feeling of walking into a civilian workplace for the first time and realizing that nobody around her understood the language she spoke or the world she came from. She didn't tell them about Jason, not yet. That door was open now, but she was walking through it slowly, one room at a time. "I spent 3 years pretending to be someone I'm not," she said. "I thought if I hid what I was, if I made myself small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, I could be normal. I could be a person who doesn't scan exits and check corners and calculate threat levels in a hospital cafeteria." She paused. "It doesn't work. You can't amputate 12 years of training and expect the wound to heal just because you changed your clothes." Marcus leaned forward. "So what does work?" "This. Being in a room with people who get it, not pretending, not performing. Just being the full version of who you are, the military part and the civilian part, and letting those 2 things exist in the same body without one of them trying to kill the other." Deshaun Williams, who hadn't said much, looked at her. "You make it sound simple. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've done some hard things." Nobody laughed. Nobody needed to. They all knew exactly what she meant. By the 2nd month, the bridge program had 18 people. By the 3rd month, 40. They came from all over the Norfolk VA system. Nurses, techs, EMTs, social workers, even 2 doctors who'd served and never talked about it. They met every Thursday at 6. Kira ran every session. She never missed one. Denise Hartwell helped. She handled the administrative side because 30 years of navigating VA bureaucracy had made her the most effective paperwork operator in the building. She filed the room requests. She coordinated the scheduling. She made sure the coffee maker had filters, and the chairs were set up, and the sign was on the door. She did it without being asked and without fanfare, because Denise Hartwell was learning, at 55 years old, that walls could be rebuilt into bridges if you were willing to do the labor. She also called her son. "Danny, there's someone I want you to talk to." "Mom, I don't need to talk to anyone." "I know you don't need to. I'm asking you to want to." "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to make sense. Just come to the hospital on Thursday, 6 o'clock, 1 meeting. If you hate it, you never have to come back." Danny Hartwell, 39, ex-Marine, Fallujah, 2004, showed up on a Thursday in late March. He stood in the doorway of the 4th floor conference room and looked at the circle of chairs and the people sitting in them, and the woman at the center with a challenge coin on her badge lanyard, and he almost turned around and walked out. Kira saw him. She recognized the posture, the rigid shoulders, the jaw set against everything, the eyes scanning the room for threats and exits and reasons to leave. "You must be Danny," she said. "My mom sent me." "I know, sit down." "I don't really do groups." "Neither did I. Sit down anyway." He sat. He didn't talk for the first 3 meetings. He sat in the back with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, and he listened to other people say the things he'd been thinking for 15 years and never had the words for. On the 4th meeting, Kira was talking about the moment she realized she couldn't be an instructor at Little Creek. She was talking about how every student had Jason's face, and every training scenario sent her back to the wadi, and she couldn't separate the teaching from the remembering, and the remembering was going to destroy her. "So I ran," she said. "I went to Guatemala. I worked in a clinic. I delivered babies. I treated dengue and malaria, and I remembered that medicine could be about beginnings, not just endings. And then I came back and I went to nursing school, and I thought I could start over." She held up Jason's coin. "You can't start over. You can only start from where you are." Danny Hartwell uncrossed his arms. He leaned forward, and he said the first words he'd said in 4 meetings. "What was his name, your friend?" "Jason. Jason Mercer, Petty Officer First Class. He was 28. "What was he like?" Kira felt her throat tighten. She'd talked about Jason's death a dozen times now. She'd never been asked what he was like. "He was funny. He could make anyone laugh, anywhere, in any situation. He once told a joke during a firefight that was so stupid, the entire team started laughing, and the enemy probably thought we were insane." She paused. "He was from Annapolis. He loved Navy football. He put Old Bay seasoning on everything, including things that should never have Old Bay on them. And he was the best person I've ever known. Not the best operator, the best person." Danny was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I had a guy like that, Corporal Miguel Santos. We called him Mickey. He could fix anything, engines, radios, people. He'd just look at something broken and figure out how to make it work." Danny's voice dropped. "IED, Route, Michigan, November 2004. I was 10 feet behind him." The room was silent, not the uncomfortable silence of people who don't know what to say, the held silence of people who know exactly what's being said and are honoring it by not filling the space with noise. "I haven't said his name out loud in 15 years, Danny said. "Say it again," Kira said. "Miguel Santos." "Again, Miguel Santos." Danny's eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them. "Mickey." "There he is," Kira said quietly. "He's still here. They're all still here. We carry them. That's the job now." Danny Hartwell came back the next Thursday, and the Thursday after that. He started talking to his mother in sentences that lasted longer than 7 minutes. He didn't become a different person. He became more of the person he'd been before Fallujah, the one his mother remembered, the one who laughed at bad jokes and called on Sundays and actually said something real. Denise told Kira about it on a Wednesday morning in the break room. She was crying, not the controlled, professional tears of a woman managing an emotion, but the messy, ugly, grateful tears of a mother who was getting her son back, one Thursday at a time. "Thank you," Denise said. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank Danny. He's the one doing the work." "I'm thanking you anyway. Deal with it." Kira laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came easy now, easier than it had in years. Not because the weight was gone, but because she'd stopped trying to carry it alone. 6 weeks after the attack, on a Thursday morning, Kira stood in the break room at dawn. She'd arrived early, the way she always did. She poured her good coffee into the thermos she brought from home. She looked out the window, the harbor, the gray shapes of Navy destroyers sitting in their berths, the morning light catching the water. She didn't ache when she looked at them anymore. She felt something else now, something she didn't have a word for yet. Not pride exactly, not peace. Something between the two, the feeling of standing in a place that finally felt like it had room for all of her. Wheels in the hallway. Dale Brixton appeared in the doorway, crossword in his lap, coffee on the armrest. He was supposed to have been discharged 5 weeks ago. His surgeon had given up. The hospital had given up. Dale Brixton was a permanent fixture now, like the building itself, old and stubborn and refusing to leave. 9-letter word for stubborn, he said. Dale, don't say obstinate. I've told you the answer 4 times, and I've told you 4 times it doesn't fit. He wheeled in and parked next to her. He poured himself a coffee from the hospital machine. He took a sip. He grimaced. He took another sip because Dale Brixton did not quit on a cup of coffee any more than he quit on anything else in his 58 years of living. I heard Danny Hartwell came to the bridge meeting again, he said. He did. I heard he's talking now. He is. I heard Denise cried in the break room. She did. I heard Angela Torres put in for the trauma bay rotation. First time in 4 years she's asked for a frontline assignment. She did. Dale shook his head. You built something, Viper. We built something. You threw an IV pole at a man with a gun. That's not nothing. My surgeon says I set my recovery back 3 months. Worth it? I'd do it again tomorrow. He looked at her. How's the nightmares? Kira paused. Nobody asked her that. Nobody knew to ask, except Dale, who heard things, who noticed things, who understood that the woman running the bridge program and saving veterans' lives was still fighting her own war every night in a dark apartment in Norfolk. Better, she said, not gone, better. That's honest. I'm working on honest. You're good at it. For a SEAL. What's that supposed to mean? It means you people are trained alive for a living, and the fact that you're choosing not to is impressive. She looked at him, this battered, impossible Marine who had appointed himself her unofficial guardian and crossword partner, and the one person in the building who called her by her call sign and made it sound like a compliment instead of an exposure. This man who had recognized her before she recognized herself and kept her secret when keeping it cost him nothing, but telling it would have cost her everything. Dale. Yeah. Thank you for seeing me before anyone else did. He waved his hand, the dismissive wave of a man who doesn't know how to accept gratitude and covers it with gruffness. Don't get sentimental on me, Senior Chief. I've got a crossword to finish. You've been working on that crossword for 2 months. It's a hard crossword. It's a Tuesday crossword. They're the easiest ones. Says you. He turned the paper toward her. Look at this. 9 letters. Stubborn. T in the 5th position. I've tried everything. Kira looked at the puzzle. She read the cross clues. She traced the letters with her finger the way she used to trace routes on a map before a mission. Methodical, precise, following each intersection to its conclusion. Tenacious, she said. Dale looked at the word, counted the letters, checked the crosses. He wrote it in. It fit. Tenacious, he repeated. He said it slow, like he was tasting it. Yeah, that's the one. He looked at her. She looked at him. 2 warriors, 1 Marine, 1 SEAL. 1 in a wheelchair he no longer needed, but refused to give up. 1 in scrubs she'd once used as a disguise and now wore as a uniform. That's you know, Dale said. That's the word. I thought you said it was just a crossword. It's never just a crossword. He raised his coffee cup. To the tenacious ones. She raised her thermos. To the ones we carry. They drank. The coffee was terrible. It was the best coffee she'd ever had. That evening, Kira drove home to her apartment. She parked. She walked up the stairs. She unlocked the door. She set her bag on the counter and her keys on the hook, and she stood in the middle of her living room and realized something that made her breath catch. It felt like home. Not the apartment. The apartment was still small and sparse and impersonal, but the feeling inside her, the ground under her feet, the air in her lungs. For 3 years, she'd been living in temporary spaces, even when she wasn't moving. Every room was a waypoint. Every city was a transit zone. Every job was a cover story for a life she wasn't really living. This was different. This was roots. She picked up her phone. She called her father. "Hey, kid. Hey, Dad, I want to tell you something." "Okay." "I'm staying in Norfolk. I found a place. Not an apartment, a place. The hospital, the people. It's where I'm supposed to be." Robert Ellison was quiet. The pause of a father who hears something in his daughter's voice that he hasn't heard in years and is afraid that if he speaks too quickly, he'll break it. "You sound different," he said. "I am different." "No, you sound like you again, like before." Kira closed her eyes. Before. Before Syria. Before Jason. Before the wadi and the blood and the 3 years of running from a ghost she was never going to outrun, because the ghost lived in her pocket and she loved him too much to let him go. "I'm not before, Dad. I'm something new. I'm all of it. The nurse and the SEAL and the woman who's still figuring it out. All of it at once." "That sounds about right." She could hear him smiling. That warm, rough Robert Ellison smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made you feel like everything was going to be okay, even when it wasn't. "I'm proud of you, kid. Always have been. But right now, tonight, hearing you say that, I'm the proudest I've ever been." "Thanks, Dad. You need anything?" "No, I've got everything I need." She hung up. She sat on her bed. She held Jason's coin one more time. She turned it over in her fingers. The trident, the anchor, JM. She pressed it to her lips. A gesture she'd made 1,000 times in the dark. But this time it wasn't grief. It was gratitude. "I'm okay, Jay," she whispered. "Really okay. Not the fake kind. The real kind. I built something. I think you'd like it. I think you'd show up on Thursday and make everyone laugh and put Old Bay on the coffee and drive Dale crazy with the crossword." She smiled. "I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. I'm right here. And I'm going to be right here tomorrow. And the day after that. And the day after that." She set the coin on her nightstand. The trident caught the lamplight. She didn't put it in her pocket. She didn't clutch it against her chest. She set it down gently, the way you set down something precious when you finally understand that carrying it doesn't mean gripping it so hard your hand goes numb. She turned off the light. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, Kira Ellison fell asleep without the dream. No wadi, no gunfire, no blood, no helicopter, just darkness and quiet and the deep, even breathing of a woman who had finally stopped running from herself. At 10:47 on a Tuesday morning, 4 armed men walked through a broken metal detector and into a room full of veterans. They expected fear. They expected compliance. They expected a soft target. What they found was a woman named Kira Ellison, who had spent 12 years saving lives in places that don't appear on maps, and 3 years trying to forget she knew how. A woman who carried a dead friend's coin in her pocket, and a hymn in her throat, and a strength she'd been hiding because she thought hiding was the same as healing. It isn't. Hiding is just a slower way of disappearing, and Kira Ellison was done disappearing. Some families are born, others are forged in break rooms and hospital corridors, and terrible coffees shared between strangers who turn out to be the same kind of different. A Marine in a wheelchair, a Master Chief behind a desk, a senior nurse with a son she couldn't reach, a young soldier who needed someone to say, "Breathe." A room full of veterans who stood up and saluted because they recognized one of their own, not by her rank or her record, but by the way she moved toward danger when every instinct in the room was screaming to move away. Kira Ellison spent 12 years being Viper. She spent 3 years trying to be nobody. She spent 3 months being the new girl. Turns out she was always just Kira, and Kira was enough. The uniform comes off. The warrior never does.